This game. It's too long.
Chaos, light, darkness, death, rebirth. This is the eternal ballet that ensures equilibrium in the world of Aeterna, a curse wrought by a vengeful god as restitution for his creation's hubris. For the world these two monarchs wished to rule was never theirs to begin with. You play as one of these cursed monarchs, the King of Darkness, a prideful soul damned to endlessly fight to the death against the Queen of Light for Aeterna's throne. After countless cycles, the immortal combatants discover a force far stronger than their ambition for power: love. And the gray soul is born, the perfect merging of light and darkness. But the King of Darkness soon discovers the consequences of the soul's very existence, and thus sets out to find a way to end this infernal dance once and for all. Aeterna Noctis was a lot of game. Too much, in my opinion. I had heard reviewers and talked to friends who said it was a 40+ hour experience, so I definitely stayed away until I had that kind of time. I had also heard it was a tough-as-nails platformer, which is not something I like to hear when it comes to Metroidvanias, especially when they're that long. However, I decided to pack away my prejudices in order to finally give this massive game a fair shake. Was it worth the time investment? Man, not for me. I did enjoy it, up to a point. I think that point was when I got the 7 MacGuffins and reached the cloudy/heavenly biome. For some reason, I just shut down. I begrudgingly pushed onward and completed the game, but it was a slog. But why? How did a game I was enjoying suddenly become so burdensome? The simple answer might be the game's ridiculous length, but there are other factors too. Let's delve into the ludicrously long MV that is Aeterna Noctis. I think my first point of contention with Aeterna Noctis was its combat. Granted, the game's more focused on platforming, but its combat felt limp. You get a standard 3-hit combo, but none of your hits have any weight to them. You don't knock enemies back with your standard sword attacks, as if your weapon just goes right through the enemies, and they can just hit back during your strikes. It didn't feel very King of Darkness-y. You find other weapons that feel more impactful that not only hit hard, but push enemies away, like the Scythe. Very King of Darkness-y. There's also a katana and a spear, but I didn't really use them because they sucked. And because I found both so late in the game when I was already broken, I just didn't care anymore. Each weapon, save the spear, is allocated to a different button, which I thought was a cool idea. Instead of having to swap between them, I could use all of them whenever I wanted. Very, very King of Darkness-y. But the game's main gimmick is its arrows. They do damage, but the real draw is how you can use them to teleport. This, without a doubt, is the best part about Aeterna Noctis. Firing arrows and then teleporting to them mid-flight or when they stuck to walls is exhilarating and made for some interesting platforming and tough boss encounters. The bosses were a major highlight. Each looked pretty nasty and put up a good fight. I can't think of a single encounter that I didn't have fun with. A few of them took me a while to defeat. I specifically remember getting my ass handed to me by my doppelganger and the 2 fights with the robot bosses after you reboot them. They were a struggle, but the answer to defeating all 3 was to respec into an arrow build. I'll get into respecking and builds later. Want to know what was tougher than the bosses? The platforming. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Platforming starts out easy enough, but the more abilities you unlock, the more the world opens up and the more devious the platforming gets. The king starts with just a jump and unlocks his lost abilities as you progress. Literally. His skills are locked behind these huge doors that can be opened once you find the keys hidden throughout the world. This was such a cool way to ability gate because 1, it fits the narrative, and 2, you could legit miss a key and not get a skill necessary to progress. That sounds terrible, but it made exploration that much more engaging and rewarding. Sometimes you gotta mix things up. You can't always be given new abilities by defeating a boss, though Aeterna Noctis does that as well. So yeah, you gotta get your abilities back. There's your standard dash/air dash, a double jump, and a wall jump. Then there's the more unique ability to enter darkness and the aforementioned arrows. Platforming really only goes off the rails once you get the teleportation ability with the arrows. That's when navigating through light and darkness comes into play, and I have to say, this game could get creative in how it screwed with you. Typically, I appreciate tough platforming, but in a Metroidvania? Imagine doing a tough platforming section and then having to do it again because you wanted to backtrack to collect stuff. It got tiresome. This wasn't always the case because sometimes there were shortcuts you could unlock, but this was definitely the case in some areas. The Forge and the Light Tower, for example. Going back to collect stuff in those biomes was torture because you'd essentially have to redo the entire biome all over again. It was a huge time sink. Now, I don't want to scare you away. Though the platforming is tough, difficulty settings exist to mitigate frustration. I played the game on Aeterna mode. It's normal difficulty. Go ahead, call me what you want in the comments below. Noctis mode apparently is where the game makes you its bitch, so you've got options. I can't speak to Noctis mode, but Aeterna was still pretty challenging at times, but never frustratingly so, except at certain occasions. Also, there's lanterns before sections that work as checkpoints, so even if you die, you can get right back up and try again. But that doesn't mean death isn't punished, mind you. Oh no, not in this post-Dark Souls timeline we're all forced to live in. Corpse running is back, baby, and it's still stupid and I hate it. But Aeterna Noctis isn't content with just taking away all your acquired experience upon death. No, it decided to be extra shitty and take away your blood vessels too. Blood vessels function essentially like soul vessels from Hollow Knight. You collect blood from defeated enemies and use it to either heal yourself or perform special moves. So you can imagine how much it sucks to get everything taken away from you whenever you die. Of course, the remedy is to simply collect your fallen soul, which can either mean picking it up off the ground or having to kill the enemy that killed you. It's not terribly egregious, I just hate corpse running so much. Can't the disgrace of being defeated be my punishment? Why must you also waste my time? As previously mentioned, you collect experience to level up your king. With each level, you get a skill point that can be placed on an easy to understand skill tree. Some of the tree is blocked until you progress to certain parts of the game, but beyond that, you really have a lot of freedom on your build. There's only 3 main builds you can make in the game: melee, arrow, and utility, but you can respec at any time at one of your thrones. Thrones are basically bonfires where you save your game, allocate skill points, and fast travel. Gems can also be equipped here, and these are basically like charms from Hollow Knight. Man, sorry I'm taking so many shortcuts by using all these references, but we all know this stuff by now, right? I'm just saving time. Gems alter your character in a bunch of different ways, like boosting damage, refilling your blood vessels continually, or making you invulnerable while dashing. You can equip 6 gems, 3 blue, 2 purple, and 1 red. As you can imagine, the red gems are super OP, so the limitation is warranted. Overall, the progression and character building in Aeterna Noctis is pretty robust, and I liked it a lot. There's no gear, but the gem system's diverse enough. I was always thrilled when I found a new gem while exploring. And exploring is something you'll be doing a lot in this game. I've already mentioned the game's redonkulous time commitment, so it only stands to reason that there's a lot of ground to cover. The map for Aeterna is gigantic in size and scope. You'll start out in these gross looking wastelands with these hulking Studio Ghibli monsters lumbering in the background. A really strong start to an MV that immediately captured my imagination, by the way. And you'll eventually go to freaking outer space. Some of the biomes are really creative and interesting, such as the Tower of Light that just keeps exploding and the awe-inspiring Infinite Sea with its flying whales. But then there are others that just bored me, like the underground tunnels and the graveyard area that just kept going. The worst part about this area is that it's the second biome in the game. There's just something about throwing players into an extremely large biome early that never sets right with me. It feels stifling. I'd rather explore and see a bunch of different areas, even if each area leads to a dead end. Early into an excellent MV, I should be able to sample as many environments as possible, really get a feel of what the world is. But I've only scratched the surface of the biomes Aeterna Noctis has to offer. There's a ton to explore, so you gotta make sure you put your journeying pants on before you throw this game in. And as much as I love exploring, I found some of the biomes to just be obnoxious. I absolutely hated my time in the Dream Kingdom where you have to use your arrows to reveal false walls and platforms. And the machine's home base or whatever it was where you had to find the keycards and flip the switches pissed me off. I always hate level design where you have to flip platforms to unblock paths, but doing so blocks other paths. It creates a lot of unnecessary backtracking, and backtracking is especially bad in this area because you have to navigate several floors, and the only way to travel between floors is to constantly run back to this one elevator in the center. It's super obnoxious. But for every obnoxious biome, there's a beautiful and captivating one. like the underworld with all those statues. Absolutely stunning. Yet, regardless of how enthralled I was with the environment, no amount of beauty or awe could diminish the sense of dread I felt every time I entered a new region. I just knew it was going to be a huge undertaking. I'm certain there are people who've played this game who never felt this way when discovering new areas, but man, the enormity of each biome coupled with the non-stop challenging platforming just never felt inviting to me. I nearly cracked when I got to the Celestial Stairway and discovered I'd need to go in 4 separate directions to get the 4 MacGuffins I needed for that asteroid. Just getting to that asteroid took forever, and getting the 4 MacGuffins took forever. This is my main gripe with Aeterna Noctis. It's just too big. Because it wants to be a challenging platformer, it needs space to create those challenges. Thus, we get the most bloated map in Metroidvania history. I guarantee they could cut every biome in half, and this game would be better for it. Quality over quantity. Over-the-top platforming difficulty just isn't what I want in a Metroidvania. I don't mind challenging platforming, but to make it the core of your MV just doesn't work. MVs are about exploration and discovery, and to eclipse that with overly demanding platforming feels like you're losing a part of what makes MVs great. It's a shame because I loved finding stuff in this game, and there's a ton of stuff to find. Blood vessel pieces, heart pieces, skill points, stained glass pieces, music sheets, keys to unlock your abilities, weapons, and those awesome gems and the dark matter needed to power those gems. There's also a few NPCs you'll meet along the way. Some give you side quests, which are conveniently tracked in your menu, and others sell you stuff in exchange for Dogma, the game's currency. You know I love me an MV with a healthy economy, but I'll always hate having to buy maps. Hunting down that stupid dwarf-looking guy in each biome didn't suck. Anyway, this game definitely rewards exploration, but most of the time, I'd be so drained from all the platforming that I didn't want to explore. I just wanted to get the biome over with. That's a terrible mentality to have while playing a game, but whose fault is it that I felt this way? Mine or the game's? Whatever. All I know is that I just wanted to move on and never look back. I know I've been drilling this game, but I swear I like it. At least, more than I don't like it. And one of the things that made me really like this game was its atmosphere. I spoke about how the biomes could be gorgeous, and I meant it. Lots of eye candy on display. And the animation's nice, except for the stupid wobble the king does every time he stops running. It made sense in the beginning, but after obtaining all his powers, you'd think he'd also regain his balance. The enemy designs were good with lots of variety. The made-up language was super dorky. I'm sorry if you liked it, but it always made me cringe. But it did go a long way in establishing the game's world building and making it feel unique. And the music sounded pretty good, gothic and epic. Holistically, everything, sound design, art direction, animations, creativity in the world, meshed well together to make Aeterna an interesting place. My one tiny complaint is that I feel the King of Darkness's design is a little too generic. And with great world building comes great story, right? Well, yeah. I actually enjoyed Aeterna Noctis' narrative. I don't want to spoil it, so I'll just say the narrative ends up being quite touching. I wouldn't say the king goes through a drastic character arc or anything. He's ostensibly arrogant throughout, but he does finally reveal his true motivations in the end. And that ending, wonderful. I connected with both the king and queen and appreciated the gravity of the revelation. Plus, it sets everything up for a sequel, which apparently is in the works, so that's cool. I'll say that the way information is trickled to the player felt pretty unnatural. You'd return to the library occasionally and be greeted with a random cutscene full of exposition. I'd have liked to have learned this information through character interactions or notes or something. Simply spoon-feeding players felt kind of lazy. There's no alternate or true ending. Typically, I'd be disappointed, but I just wanted this game to end. They did set up for an alternate ending, it seems, but I think it was actually world building for the sequel. There's this biome you find early in the game that teases you because you can't fully navigate it until you've unlocked all your abilities, though returning to it after each ability unlock will net you some sweet loot. It was a great idea for a biome and encapsulate what makes exploring in MVs great. Anyway, this section ends with a very weird and intriguing interaction that doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of happens and you never hear about it again. After completing the game, I researched what was going on, and apparently what I had completed was the Pit of the Damned DLC that was released post-launch, pretty much solidifying my suspicion that its events are teeing up for the sequel. To the game's credit, I had no idea I had entered a biome inserted after launch. I much prefer seamless DLC integration like this over something that feels tacked on at the end. More games should follow Aeterna Noctis' example in this respect. Although I had been led to believe Aeterna Noctis was a 40+ hour game, it took me 24.5 hours to complete it. And with my 81.2% completion rate, it's obvious I didn't do everything. When I completed the game, the collection page in the pause menu was still locked, but I didn't care. This game beat me down so badly that I just wanted to get it over with. I looked up the side quests I missed and learned the rewards were red gems, which are terrible rewards. You can only equip one red gem at a time because they're so OP, and I had found one I thought was the best, the Vampire Soul. So acquiring the other gems would have been a waste of time because I wasn't switching it out. Plus, I had already beaten the game, proving the other gems weren't necessary. One could argue that I missed some of the game's content, to which I say, that's kind of the point. Aeterna Noctis has no business being as big as it is. I said earlier that they could cut all the biomes in half to make it better, and I stick by that. It seems they were going for a grand and sweeping epic, but instead created a strenuous test of my patience. When most of the game's real estate is used for precision platforming, everything else gets lost in the sauce. It shouldn't be exhausting to the player to traverse your map. Would I recommend Aeterna Noctis? I don't think I would to casual players or newcomers to the genre. Maybe to the most dedicated and hardcore players, with the caveat that it's more of a challenging platformer than a Metroidvania. And that it's long. I know there are other long MVs out there like Hollow Knight, Afterimage, and Cathedral, but they don't feel as long as Aeterna Noctis. Well, maybe Cathedral. Near the end, every minute with Aeterna Noctis felt like an hour as I hopped through that cloud biome, but even though the game overstayed its welcome, I ultimately enjoyed it. Aeterna Noctis does a lot of things right. Character customization, excellent presentation, good story, sticks the landing on the ending, and lots of things to discover. It's just too bad I was over it all long before the credits rolled. But I'll be playing the sequel when it gets released. I just hope the devs learn the simple, universal rule that bigger doesn't always mean better.